Alright, time for some more illogic. Last time we went over a Week 5 match against Michael and his Route 1 Burbs in a two-part special spanning this channel and the main Wooper Club League channel. Please go check out those videos first if you have not done so already, as we went over the team builder on this channel and the battle on the main league channel, in which, spoiler alert, the Bouffalant clinched another winning season with a 2-0 victory, bringing our overall record to 4-1 with a plus 14 differential. This time we've got the 1-4 Lorain Lairon. Timestamps are in the description. The Lairon started the season 0-4, but have looked progressively better and better as their debut season has continued, culminating in a big upset win over the Boulders just last week. This is now also the third consecutive week in which our opponent has made transactions right before facing us, and with the end of the season rapidly approaching, I can start to make some educated guesses about the team that's coming. The overall squad consists of Dragapult, Salazzle, Archeops, the steep speed drop to Nidoking, Mandibuzz, another steep speed drop to Azumarill, Beartick, Registeel, Melmetal, Slowbro, and Ferroseed. The new mons are the Salazzle, Mandibuzz, Azumarill, and Ferroseed, with a small Hail Core being dropped among others. It makes some sense. The Salazzle adds some consistent speed and strong fire offense. The Mandibuzz is an amazing partner to Dragapult and multiple steel types to absorb lots of hits while providing defog support and a ground immunity. Azumarill helps with speed a good bit too with Aqua Jet and provides an immediate and setup threat. And Ferroseed, well, it does provide spikes and leech seed while being tanky. That's actually more than you could say about a lot of mods, though still tripling up on steel types is a bit questionable. Still, the top of the lineup is fearsome, and at least the beginning of their draft garnered lots of praise, so with some experience under their belt, it makes sense that this could be a tough one. Although, maybe not because of Beartick, who struggles without his Weather Setter. It has actually been pretty effective a couple times this season, especially for a 20-point mon, and even outside of weather, but I really don't see it coming anymore without the Alolan Fox. It only outspeeds Bronzong naturally on my team, doesn't hit it with Stab even. There are plenty of other slower threats that do more against me. Registeel is next for me. A consistent Rock Setter is annoying, but, well, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but rocks aren't all that good against me this season. With boots and lots of rock resist all the way around, it's not exactly the biggest concern. Even Curse or Iron Defense sets aren't as concerning, since I've been leading on Earth Power, Nidoqueen, and Sacred Sword Kartana to bypass that boost, so I'll give it a pass. I'll go with Slowbro next, weak to Leaf Blade and Dark Pulse for my 180-point mons, plus Toxic and Knockoff Bait, all of which feature prominently on my team. In my opinion, it's just too much to justify the physical bulkiness and Stab Scald that could otherwise wreck me a bit. Now here's where things get a little tricky, because I have a couple mons that aren't necessarily the best in the matchup here, but they may need to come from my opponent because they're new acquisitions and have not yet made an appearance. I'll stick them in the bringing category and settle for Archeops and Nidoking as the ones to miss the cut then. Archeops has put in a lot of work for my opponent this season, every time so far with a Scarf and clicking Stabs plus Knockoff, but I actually have a few solutions to that. Having it locked into a Scarf is a good thing with my plethora of resists and a lack of overall fragility. Stone Edge, for example, which ripped through Chad's team, is resisted by common brings on my squad like Bronzong, Nidoqueen, Swampert, even Kartana can wall it relatively well without Heat Wave. With dual Wing Beat means it struggles to break through things like Bronzong, Still, or Lantern, so Knockoff may be the worst for me, but even that isn't exactly the strongest after one use, especially without Stab. I'll say I can cover it. And the last is going to be Nidoking. A Scarf on the King would actually be a little bit tough, as it's a bit tough for me to scout that out, and it hits on a generally weaker for me special side, but I don't know if the coverage will be enough for it. I've got a few speedy threats that can relatively easily get the jump on it, including all of my top picks, plus a couple mons that aren't hit super effectively by common coverage, such as Bronzong or Swampert, that should help out against it. I think I can trade with Nidoking better than most, but both this and Archeops have the potential to claim a KO if they come in at the right time. On the other hand, Ferroseed may very realistically come, even if it isn't the best. A week after Ferrothorn proved spikes are a bit tougher to deal with than Stealth Rock for my team, Ferroseed could reprise that role, especially if I don't bring my best fire coverage or taunt. Leech Seed is relatively free too, of course, and restores more percentage of HP to Ferroseed compared to Thorn. It is weaker though and has about 0 offensive presence, and is incredibly susceptible to both taunt and knockoff, the latter of which I'm pretty well known for, so I think I've got a few ways to deal with it should it come. Salazzle is borderline too, but the case for it is simple. It's a fire type, and it outspeeds Kartana. That's about all it needs, honestly, but fire offense is actually kind of scary too, especially with the potential sub-toxic set that it tends to run, or a choice set just obliterate things, so it's a little bit worrisome. Worrisome is a bit of an understatement for the last four, though, starting with Melmetal, whose base stat total is actually just kind of nutso. Double Iron Bash eats things for breakfast, and even Resist can be met with things like Superpower, Earthquake, or Thunder Punch, and it's a tough thing to be able to hit KO. It may be slow, but something like a Trick Room Slowbro is possible at the overall low speed of my opponent's team, or maybe just a Choice Band is going to rip me apart, or an Assault Vest so it can tank 3 hits instead of 2, or a Rest Set to tank even more than that. What a problem. Mandibuzz seems like a perfect fit for my opponent's team, and a great fit against my squad as well. This is their best option for Kartana, a ground immunity for an otherwise spammable move type, a defogger, knockoff user, roost user. It's just a great fit next to my next big problem, Dragapult. Base 142 speed with Stab Ghost and Dragon with my Dark type being weak to Dragon and outsped. Yeah, that's an issue. Steel Wing on the physical side for a Bombi, Fire Blast on the special side potentially too, D-Dance setup, choice specs, there are several sets that are just not possible to wall, and I definitely don't outspeed without a Scarf, so here we are, I guess. Finally, new acquisition Azumarill is probably what I'm most afraid of. I love having something on my team at all times that can survive a +6 Aqua Jet, but my sturdiest water resist are Lantern, who would require probably a good bit of speed to be able to hit back with a subpar attacking stat despite the super effective stab, and Hydreigon, who struggles to do even a third in response with just about anything. Oh, yeah, it could just be a choice band set too with superpower or knockoff to complement the water and fairy stabs, just about impossible to wall or deal with. On my side, Ribombee just does not have a good time. About the only thing that Sticky Webs may want to slow down are Dragapult, who's immune to Clear Body, Archeops, who's immune, and then Salazzle, which I already would outspeed with this, and Torn, and I may not be able to outspeed that. And even the Nidoking, potentially, I may not even be able to outspeed at -1, depending on investment from some mons here. Not to mention, Mandibuzz is nearly guaranteed to come and bring Defog. Psychic is kind of neat coverage. Moonblast chunks Dragapult, but those steel types are so difficult for Bombi to get through, so no go for the B. Lantern also doesn't do much despite outspeeding more than half of the team. I don't do much of anything to Dragapult. I'm susceptible to Earthquake and Earth Power from Archeops and Nidoking, and about the best I can do to Melmetal or Ferroseed is potentially fish for a Scald Burn, which would admittedly be pretty good, but I have better defensive answers this time, so it's the first time in 3 weeks for this 60-point Mon to ride the bench. My other 60-point Mon Sock also kinda struggles here. It's a bit tougher to lock into fighting moves with a choice item, thanks to the Ghost type, plus the Azumarill, plus resist like Salazzle, and Nidoking of course, and a sturdy set isn't that great with the extreme possibility of Dragon Darts, Dual Wing Beat, and Double Iron Bash from Dragapult, Archeops, and Melmetal, plus all the hazards from Ferroseed that could force boots. Just too many things needed to make Sock work. I'll stick with some other options. The rest, I think, could all work pretty well here, but again, I'll leave Arcanine behind this time. Ground coverage is a bit concerning, and Azumarill plus Dragapult loom large as the biggest threats. I don't actually do much to them without coverage. Dragapult is hit by Play Rough, Azumarill is hit by Wild Charge, but those aren't OHKOs, and they will get big hits in before me. Against things like Melmetal, I don't OHKO, I take Recoil or hit from the weaker special side, get bopped by an Earthquake. A defensive Will-O-Wisp set actually looked really appealing this week too. I think I could have brought that, but like last week, it didn't quite fit in with the rest, and I don't like the idea of missing the burn or mixing it with the other statuses I'm focusing on heavily this week. Finally, it came down to my 2 Ghost Resists, but ultimately I chose Hydreigon on the bench. I think most other contexts I would have brought it, not just the obvious Scarf set, which looked good. I had another idea or two for it. Something like a Bonberry could have been really interesting in this week, but I also really needed to bring Kangaskhan this week or next, and frankly it looks pretty good this week against a weaker opponent. Hydreigon's ability to spam Dark Pulse is amazing, but Mandibuzz is always an answer, plus for the 2nd week in a row, and 3rd time out of 4 weeks, I am besieged by a Water Fairy type that Hydreigon cannot answer very well. Add in things like Melmetal taking at least 1 hit every time while threatening Superpower, and threats like Nidoking that could spam Ice Beam with this round, and I think it's not too big of a loss to bring the Kangaroo over this, though it is probably concerning that in the last 4 weeks, a 180-point Mon hasn't appeared at all. The one time it was brought Kartana swept before the set I was so excited for even took shape. Hydreigon and Arcanine staying on the bench again is sad, but that's kind of what happens when you make transactions to replace all your low tiers and have to use them by the end of the season. I'd rather not constrict myself in my final week where we're going to be somewhere between a meme match and fighting for first place. We've got another relatively structured game plan, but if there's a worry, it's that I don't have too blatant of a win con. Well, Kartana is always a win con, but it's the 3rd time in 4 weeks I'm bringing Scarf. Yeah, I felt more and more comfortable with Kartana, but how much of that is the quality of opponents? Eventually my card will be figured out, but until then, holding it for a late game sweep is probably going to have to be the play. Speed for Scarf Nidoking lets us run Adamant, Knock for Dragapult, Leaf Blade for Azumarill and others, Sacred Sword for Melmetal and all the others. It's pretty obvious. I still can't actually hit Mandibuzz all that hard or well, even with Smart Strike as the last move to hit everything neutrally once the steals are all down, so it may be a requirement to Toxic that down first or get it low. Smart Strike still may be doing somewhere around 30% anyways, which I think is probably just fine. The other fun thing we can do is simply have our Tornadus use Taunt, which is also amazing for stopping Ferroseed as well. I really don't have an offensive presence on Torn this week, but the utility is from its 4 big moves, and that should just be plenty. Taunt aside, which can force many switches on its own, U-Turn can take advantage of those switches pretty handily and get us into the big hitters, or even just check if something like Melmetal may be staying in. Knockoff, of course, is about my favorite move, especially to remove things like Boots from Mandibuzz, or choice items from things like Dragapult, plus leftovers on things trying to somewhat nullify residual chip. Finally, Defog is an emergency option for Ferroseed spikes. I really don't have anything that OHKOs it, and that could lead to my opponent just setting up a bunch of layers, so just in case I need to be ready to sack this to defog away all the spikes. There are other ways I can take advantage of Ferroseed anyways. The first and chief among those will be, of course, Nidoqueen with Substitute. That Pharaoh ain't touching me like this, and neither will Mandibuzz, so I thought this could be kind of a neat option with a bit of recovery and Black Sludge as well. I don't need to invest any speed. I could have put a bit on for Mint Speed. Mandibuzz, I guess, probably missed that, honestly. So I've got the ability to run Modest again with lots of bulk and max HP. Stabs hit Melmetal, Registeel, Salazzle, Nidoking, and Azumarill, while Ice Beam is the coverage move for Dragapult, Mandibuzz, and Archeops. Seems decent, straightforward. With Sub I just have to watch out for, as we'd spoken previously with Sturdy, Double Iron Bash, Dragon Darts, Dual Wing Beat, potentially though also Infiltrator, Dragapult, though it should be Clear Body due to the threat of Sticky Webs. Some familiar roles all around. We of course have Swampert as usual with a couple of quirks. It's our Rock Setter, it's got EQ, it's got Flip Turn for pivoting, and it's max HP and defense, but the couple quirks include the Rocky Helmet for Melmetal and the surprise Focus Punch. You think I can't touch Ferroseed? How about a surprise 2-hit KO if it tries to set up spikes on me? Maybe you think Mandibuzz will have Helmet to wear me down. If you get it low, hit a Toxic or something else, Focus Punch nailing that too on a Roost. Kinda neat. Probably could have been anything else, but this is, again, a pretty neat option. I wanted to try it. Speaking of suboptimal but neat, I wanted to try something kind of interesting. We've got two very similar sets to finish things off. I've run Power Herb on Bronzong, now introducing Scarf Bronzong. I mean, okay, it's got a Scarf because I want to trick it onto Melmetal or Mandibuzz or Ferroseed, but come on, that's kind of neat. I even outspeed the base 50s with this, which is kind of weird, and I can EQ the Ozzy or Registeel. Okay, it really is all about clicking trick, but still, not often you see Protect on a Mon with a Scarf. Toxic is the last move there after EQ. The goal is definitely to trick the Scarf, protect a Scout, and poison things like Mandibuzz or Dragapult that are looking to switch in. This is my big Dragon Resist for Dragapult's move, so my Ghost Resist must be, yep, it's Kangaskhan with her debut. If Bronzong was physically bulky to physical sets, the special bulk on Kangaskhan is important to deal with special sets, being immune to Shadow Ball chiefly. Yes, 3 of the same moves as Bronzong with Toxic, Protect, and EQ is the only attack move. Figure EQs on those Mons to be able to hit the Steel types that we can't poison, as well as the Salazzle and the Nidoking. I thought that just kind of made sense here. We have Wish, though, as the last move here. I don't have lefties on anything else, chiefly the bulky Swampert or the Bronzong, so I kind of like the idea of passing a Wish off to them after they've taken a beating, and it allows Protect to serve multiple purposes, being recovering itself and or racking up toxic damage, so I thought that was kind of neat there too. We tried leading into Toxic last week. It didn't really work out, but maybe this time we can force it to work out. Let's check it out. No Ferroseed, that'll force them to bring it the final week, and Archeops is there instead. Nice, not worried about hazards much then, and my lack of fire coverage ended up paying off, though it's a punish to the couple mons that only have ground coverage because of that Archeops. Now for leads. I didn't actually think about this much. Ultimately, though, there are a couple of things people default to for leads, and that is the fast mons and the hazard setters. Dragapult would be pretty troublesome. Salazzle isn't really a lead. Archeops, actually, Scarf Archeops would be real fast, and it's the only way to set hazards for my opponent this match. If that's the case, what's my best answer to it? Protect's a way to scout the Scarf, and getting a Toxic on it would be actually pretty nice too. If that and Dragapult are the most likely leads for my opponent, maybe I could just lead Kangaskhan? I don't switch into Dragapult well anyways, well, nobody does. So let's just go with that. Good luck, have fun, 2-dude. And it is indeed the Archeops. Well, we've got two plays here from what I can tell. The first is to Wish up. If an attack is coming in, I can heal back up to full after Protect the next turn, while scouting the choice-locked move. The other option is Toxic, which is something proactive to do in the case that rocks are coming up and still does something to an attack. And after turn 2, Protect can both scout, Scarf, and get a bit of chip. So I think we're going to go for that, at least potentially. We are correct. Stealth rocks do come down. We do actually land the Toxic. That's pretty nice too. I could definitely Protect for chip this turn, but I'd rather be prepared for the next move. Stonage does half to me. Knockoff is very annoying, and if it's choice locked, it'll be a hard switch. So I'll just Wish up so I will be able to heal myself or something else, especially if, yes, you turn out pretty good chip actually. That implies a good amount of physical investment, and I'm just going to go out into Melmetal on the Wish. Well, it would be nice to heal up for Dragapult later, but I also don't mind going into Swampert immediately to take the damage and heal right up. So I'm just going to go right into Swampert. It's a designated answer to this, and T-Wave. That is a cute option for things like Cortana or Torn or Hydreigon. It's a cool move. Don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. I also don't think Melmetal is going to stay in, and if it does, I think I could take the non-choice hit pretty well. We know can't be choice locked, because it just used Thunder Wave, so even if it is Choice Select, it's not hitting us with that. So I'm just going to opt to get my own rocks up right now so we can match. Switch out, perfect, and in comes the Mandibuzz on rocks. That's fine. It could choose to defog, of course, but my opponent prioritized getting out rocks on turn 1, so we may just be okay on that front. Again, I've pretty consistently done just fine against rocks this season, out-trading my opponents when we both have rocks and taking minimal chip otherwise, so I'm really not that worried. Instead, what will we do about the Mandibuzz? Right now, I wish I had Toxic over the Focus Punch, but we should be okay, I think. I could flip turn out to get to the slow pivot, but I'm a little worried about the consequences. What does Mandibuzz do here? Worst case scenario, Toxic to whittle down my Metal check, or Knockoff to remove a huge portion of my Metal checking ability. Well, frankly, even if I don't have any evidence of anything, I'm actually currently kind of doubting my whole Bronzong strat. Ideally, I can get the trick off, yes, but when? I don't know if I'll really be able to get it in neutrally, and then what? What happens when, say, I trick and get something useless back from, I don't know, Metal, or I get knockoffed and then trick, and then I get knocked off again? I guess it was that plus the possibility of taking advantage of a Mandibuzz that may not knock that led me to go into Bronzong here. I'm going to go out there, take rocks, take the U-turn, and out into Salazzle. Well, that's just great, and not like outspeed, and I absolutely do not want Salazzle to have a Scarf. My switch-ins to fire moves are limited, Swampert needs to remain healthy, Kangaskhan's gotten chipped and is for Dragapult, and Torn can't exactly do much back. In that case, looking at the numbers, Bronzong won't get KO'd unless it's a boosting item, which we know it's not, because Salazzle is sitting at full health on a pile of rocks. It's not Specs, it's not Scarf, it's not Charcoal, it's not Shukaberry, it's not even Sash, it's Boots. Modest Flamethrower doesn't KO the Bronzong, actually. Well, there's a reason I have 4 Mons with ground moves on them. Let's go for it. And we get the best case scenario Nasty Plot up as I lock myself into EQ. Oko 6-5 with Bronzong on the board. That's nice, that's real nice. Bronzong coming through already. I never doubted the set, even for a moment. It does invite in Dragapult, who has free ghost moves, aside from, of course, the Kangaskhan, and I can't exactly click Toxic or Protect right now because of my item. My switch-ins are, well, there are a lot of things I can do, but Kangaskhan is probably my best answer to most, if not all of them. This is what Kangaskhan is here for, right? If this is coming in, I don't think it's going to be a physical set. They would need to have Phantom Force to be able to hit this. You know what, though? Either way, Kangaskhan is going to come out. Draco Meteor is going to come out, too. It should be tanked not as comfortably as I wanted. That is Specs right there. We're going to need to be careful. I can't even wish up this turn because Draco Meteor at -2, or I guess -1, because the item will still KO from here easily. Obviously, I'm going to have to protect for Lefty's recovery. Yep, my opponent knows it too. Lefty's has at least healed up the rocks damage here, right? Oh boy, guess we're going to have to switch out. Will my opponent switch out too? I'm a little worried about residual into Bronzong. It's my only Dragon Resist. I kind of need to do it anyways. I need to minimize residual here. My opponent also switches, though. They go into Mandibuzz, so we're kind of in the same spot as before, I guess. A little bit, at least. Last time that you turned out on my switch into Bronzong instead of clicking Knockoff. Instead of Salazzle, what would they be going into this time? I've got a pretty good feeling about it, so I'll click Trick this time and see if we can catch them staying in and acquiring their non-boots item, by the way. Maybe a helmet, or trick something else. U-turn again, that's just fine by me. And into Metal. Ooh, that's perfect. Have a Scarf, friend. Ooh, it's amazing. And we get the leftovers, Protect to Scout. It's a double Iron Bash. Trying to flinch me. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I'll just take leftovers recovery instead. That worked out perfectly. And I never doubted my brilliance. Anyways, that's a pretty easy swap into Swampert, though I could stay in an EQ, I suppose, but Swamp makes pretty good sense too, and of course a good switch again for my opponent to go into Pult again. 2 rounds of rocks into it so far, at least. Well, shoot. Now what do I go into? I want to save that Swampert to punish Metal, but I should be able to survive a hit and hit back hard with EQ. That should at least be a possibility. I could also sack Kangaskhan. It's here for Dragapult anyways. Or going to Bronzong, who can take the Dracos before. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll try and find a mid-ground play. Torn can survive any hit, and Regenerator back up. And even if I have to go in and out a couple of times to ensure that, Regenerator is still a goated ability. So we're going to try that. Out we go into Torn and a U-turn. Man, I wish I had stayed in and EQ'd into a Azumarill. It's just a harmless little bunny rabbit. No, it's not. This is a menace. I don't actually survive a banded hit. but I also can't let it set up Belly Drum. Right? Wait, with a full health cart in the back to revenge, I can afford to let it Belly Drum, actually. Kartana, I don't think I mentioned it, but it might actually be my best check to that Banded Aquajet, or the Aquajet coming from +6. Kartana actually has a defensive profile this matchup, especially if maybe that Archeops doesn't have Heat Wave. But either way, I can actually afford to let it Belly Drum potentially. Actually, it'd be more important to give myself some options. And to that end, I'll click Knockoff, which can remove a Citrus Berry, can remove Mystic Water, or the actual winner here of a Choice Band. Liquidation's disgusting damage into is pretty spoopy, but we'll spoil a little bit here, but that's fine. Another will KO me. I'm out of range of Aquajet though, so because I'm 100% utility, I'm not even packing Hurricane. I can just U-turn out. But what do I go into exactly? My physical tanks don't like this. I'm not risking taking a superpower into my grass type. Well, frankly, with Melmetal a little bit neutered, I should have less of a problem taking it out compared to the chip I can get onto Azu. Swampert, you're up. We're just going to go into that as we get down to a nice percentage. And superpower indeed. Nice attempt to try and catch the cart. I can respect that very much so. But instead, I'll take only a third and in return do some damage back with the helmet. Now it's at -1 defense as well. That is guaranteed to switch out. And that means that we should be able to take advantage of that. Because it's going to do that, flip turn we go. Melmetal is in to take a little bit of chip, the rocks, and soak up the flip turn hit again. That's fine by me. I'll just go into one of my protect users. This was probably a misplay, honestly. I realized it as soon as I clicked Kangaskhan. Bronzong just makes more sense. It's fully Fizz Def. It's got lefties now to immediately recover from the rock chip and would limit my opponent's options further. Instead, I went Kanga, but it's probably fine. We're going to click Protective Court to scout, and it will be Superpower. That makes some sense, trying to catch a Swampert or Kartana or Bronzong. That's fine. I have seen no need to overpredict. I'm actually going to go into a Resist, not one that's taken a bunch of damage from Liquidation, but actually into something new, the Nidoqueen, and we're going to eat that up pretty easily. Num num num, 25%. That's enough for a substitute, but that's fine. Black Sludge up a little bit too. This is a guaranteed switch out, actually, because we see the minus attack there. Earth Power looks incredibly obvious. My two thoughts here are to either sub up, which should get me a KO before Dragon Pulse comes in if it's Infiltrator, or to clicking attacking move. Of the attacking moves, Earth Power really doesn't make any sense here. Melmetal will be switching out. That's guaranteed. Not at -1 attack, locked into Superpower. That choice item coming in clutch. Sludge Wave does damage to everything else, especially the Azu, but that's definitely not coming out either into something that outspeeds it. It's going to be one of the other three, all of which are weak to Ice Beam. Not wanting to potentially lose out on some HP for a needless sub, I decide to take the safe route, and I clicked Ice Beam. Melmetal is out, Mandibuzz is in, Ice Beam with the easy KO, and that is 6-4 with Dragapult, of course, being the revenge option once again, taking yet another round of rocks. Well, I don't exactly have a Dragapult switch in at this point, but it's probably fine. Kanga or Bronzong needs to come in here. I chose the Kangaskhan because it's so low, but honestly, I think I probably should have saved it. Shadow Ball has now become extremely spammable because of this sack here, and it means that I need a healthy Mon or the cart with the scarf on in order to take care of it, as opposed to Draco lowering the special attack to give me revenge opportunities. Whichever I thought may be coming, I think I should have gone Bronzong originally. I didn't. Kanga goes down 5-4, but I can make up for that mistake a little bit here by going into something else. Bronzong will be able to tank Dracos even at -2, better than just about everything else. Well, I doubt it's staying in, but what would his switch be? I'm a little bit curious as to what the next move will be. Melmetal doesn't make any sense. I should be coming in on Melmetal with Bronzong. That leaves the other two. I can't do anything to Archeops. If I can do anything to it anyways, I may as well try and nail the Azu with a Toxic, which is probably the most damage I'm going to do, or at least if I need to switch around, it will start to rack up a little bit and maybe force more switching around, and we see how good those rocks have been for me so far. So I think because it will open up the most amount of counterplay against it, that's kind of been a big thing for this match, opening up possibilities in counterplay, and particularly because if I get it just that little bit lower from a couple rounds of, say, Toxic, something like the Swampert could then be able to take it out with Earthquake if I just get it that little bit lower, because it's HP invested, as we found out before from the knockoff. So we're going to just go for that. Archeops does come in instead. It's going to take no damage from rocks because of boots. Toxic does nothing as it's already poisoned. and I realize my full moveset has now been laid forth for my opponent. We both know now that I cannot touch this, so what's it going to be? Are you going to switch, or am I just going to sit here while you die to Toxic? That's what it's looking like, because I click Protect, and that is going to stop the Heat Wave, an important move, lest Kartana wall the Archeops, which is a really funny statement to say. An Azu switch would have been kind of devastating there, actually, but we're good now. Speaking of, I may as well Toxic again to cover for those switches on this turn, but they're content to just Heat Wave again. That's going to take a little less than half from my max HP Bronzong. It is now in defeatist range. I actually went for EQ there just to kind of see if I could get chip or damage onto something, especially because the Dragapult seemed a little more likely. Just want to get it in a little bit more range, but it's fine. It is actually, after this round of poison, going to be in defeatist range, thankfully, and that will have the special attack. So this threat is mostly neutralized. Roost is possible on a boot set, but I think we're probably good for now. I'm going to Protect again on another Heat Wave. Archeops looks like it's got one turn left on this Earth. Doesn't look like it wants to swap out. So now what? I can try to double Protect, but honestly, I don't like the idea of Bronzong being left out here without the ability to Protect on whatever the next switch in is, especially something like Dragapult. Will the Archeops change up its strat and U-turn out, or reveal that last move? Anyway, you look at it, Torn looks safe, barring a surprise rock move. So actually, especially crit Stone Edge isn't doing as much either because it does not bypass that ability. There really isn't anything else to worry about so long as we don't get hit by the Stone Edge. Nothing to worry about. Heat Wave only does 14%. Kangaskhan with a KO on the board for that. And both Kangaskhan and Sokka got KOs this season. That's excellent. 5-3 now. And of course, we already know what's back in. It's going to be the Dragapult, 51%. Without my Shadow Ball immunity, I think we all know what's coming. Well, honestly, Bronzong not doing that much anymore, losing outright to Dragapult and Azu, whereas everything else has tons of use. So unfortunately, it will be goodbye to Bronzong. You did great, and it will be 4-3. I have to be looking at Kartana now at this point. Frankly, it's actually a little bit frightening. I can obviously come in and click Knock, but a switch out would mean Knock isn't actually the move, with Melmetal and Azu surviving multiples, and I really want that Melmetal to continue to be stuck. That switch out would be so obvious too, considering I would only bring it in this situation if I were Scarfed. We're definitely not out of the woods yet, actually. I've got to bring in either Nidoqueen or Torn, with Swampert saved for Helmet Chip in the back and threatening EQ if I can get it in on one of these slower threats. That said too, Dragapult just needs a little more chip to be in Leaf Blade range, and we've accomplished that with an unlikely source, these Stealth Rocks, which have taken about half of the Dragon Cannon's HP already. One more switch in, and Leaf Blade will KO it even at with a resist there, so that's pretty good. Well then, if I can KO the Melmetal, or get that down very low, we should be in business. Even KOing the Azu would honestly help me a ton, even just getting good damage on the Melmetal could get it potentially in range, taking even just a little bit from the rocks and be able to get it in range of, say, 2 Leaf Blades would be more than enough for me. Easier said than done. We're still at the Torn versus Nidoqueen decision, but I've got a plan. Considering the bit of damage I need for Leaf Blade, it's really not much. I think I can actually get that little bit of damage another way. I'm actually going to go into Tornadus here because I only need a little bit, and unfortunately we get to see a little bit of what's going on there, but that's okay. I do threaten the knockoff, and Torn has become healthy after tanking the Heat Wave and Liquidation. I really love Regenerate, and you really need to shout out how good that is. My opponent has seen knockoff as well. There can be no mistake about what I'm going for here, or at the very least, my opponent needs to respect my ability to survive a hit and click knockoff. Even if my opponent makes the play and stays in, I can get a strong Leaf Blade in with Kartana. Even into Melmetal, it should be doing around 20%. That chip will stay too. A couple switches from there, and we should still be able to pull the game out one way or another. Best case scenario happens here, though. Dragapult switches out again, meaning it will be in range of Leaf Blade anyways from the next time it comes in on rocks. That's 5 times. And Melmetal is going to come in on the U-turn. And as we've done time and time again this season, it's time for Nidoqueen to shine. Earth Power will be claiming a KO here, and the one we will be claiming is going to end up being up to my opponent. It's the Melmetal, 4-2, and honestly, at this point, that should be about GG. Nidoqueen even survives a Shadow Ball from this range, so it's once again going to be a matter of what to sack and switch in. Because we can take care of the Azu, it just needs to Aqua Jet. I could go Swampert pretty safely there. A Kartana would be pretty risky. I do easily survive the Aqua Jet though, and I'm just going to click Sludge Wave. That's 3 KOs for the Queen again, really coming into its own this season. as Dragapult is the last one left. It's basically a formality at this point. I'll choose to keep Swampert's Deathless streak going and make Torn look a little better in the stat line by keeping Nidoqueen in. Of course, it goes down to Shadow Ball after the Aqua Jet chip, but Kartana is lurking in the back, and a knockoff will do it. And for the 4th week in a row, we secure a W with Kartana on the board, grabbing the final KO. This time a 3-0 victory. GG to the Lairon. There were a couple of extremely scary threats, especially that Dragapult that had 3 KOs this match. Not to mention the Azu that I had a very tough time being able to touch, but it worked out. I'm definitely seeing some improvement as a coach from my opponent. But let's talk about our all-around performance, too. Cart in the back is so good, I think I tried to force it to come out too early in the first couple weeks, and I paid for it. Now with Cart being the last mon out of a couple weeks in a row, I think I've gotten more comfortable with it, and I've established a pattern that I can play around with now. I'll just leave that comment there for now. And next I'll mention the Kangaskhan, who I know I could have used better. My Shadow Ball immunity didn't tank any Shadow Balls, just a couple Dracos and a U-turn, but it did get on the board with a Toxic KO of Archeops. Decently good stuff there, at least. A nice use of a 40-point mon. I don't think I could have asked for much more, though I know I could have done better on my end. Swampert did its job, didn't helmet back a double Iron Bash like I'd hoped, but did get to immune a T-Wave, tank an Azu hit and do recoil, force and Bolt. It was fine. Could have put in more work, but my opponent was weary of the helmet the whole time, it feels like. I can't say I blame them too much either, and I actually had a good flip turn or two in there anyway, so I think it was fine. Torn, reliable as always, tanking the liquidation after removing the choice band, then providing pivot potential around Archeops and others while regenerating up, finishing off with probably the game-deciding move of U-turning on Dragapult instead of clicking knockoff, brought to you by Regenerator. Imagine if I clicked the knockoff there instead, gotten just a little bit of chip onto the Melmetal, but not a great amount, then maybe go into the Swampert on something. It would have been pretty messy. I think that would have cost at least 1 or 2 differential points, so thank you to Tornadus for that one for sure. That brought in Nidoqueen, though, who tanked a Superpower and an Aqua Jet en route to another 3 KO performance, 2nd in a row. Absolute beast that has quickly become one of my favorites in a similar vein to my Nidoking usage in Season 8. But of course, and maybe I'm overselling it a bit, I probably am, but Bronzong was a legend this game. The EQ turned 6, I was so excited upon making this play. Ooh, Bronzong, you're kind of nasty for that. Getting the trick off on Melmetal, this is so convenient too. Neutering it from the get-go, so it did almost nothing, defeating it in a very different way that I had intended with Swampert's helmet. Finally, the protecting was amazing, scouting Melmetal's moves, stalling out Archeops all the way from full health down to nothing. Bronzong was able to sit in front of and or defeat half of my opponent's team. Bronzong definitely been worth it, even after the subpar performance just last week. What a fun team we've had this season, which is coming to a close very soon. We're sitting at 5-1, plus 17 differential, good for 2nd overall as part of a 3-way tie for 5-1 for 1st, with the Close Combat Club and the Seattle Steamrollers, the former of which we've consulted with throughout the season, and the latter of which we handed their only loss. We're in good company, and for our final week of the season, it's another tough one against Elf Owls and the 4-2 Newport Noctowls. We've clinched our playoff spot, but you know we want the glory of being at the top of the standings, so let's see if we can make some magic happen in Week 7. See ya.